this whole idea started with Brian and I talking during MagicCon, and they had a great idea for Tech Friday about why we do the things we do when we produce a show. And so I took that, and maybe I can convince Brian to come on when we get to the point of putting everything together as a whole and talk about it. But it's my fault again, isn't it? It is totally your fault. And so I'm going to talk about story and crafting a story. And for our structure, I'm going to use the screenplay, right? So a movie script. Nandor making work for himself. I'm excited to see it, right? And so I back up. I'm going to put in my qualifications for talking about all this. I went to college. I did a study of film video like 4 years, right? That part of my bachelor's degree. I've read numerous books on screenplays. I've written sketch comedies. I've been paid to write drafts of screenplays. So I sort of know what I'm talking about, at least if you want something of go, are you just pulling this out of nowhere? No, I have learned things to tell you, and hopefully it all makes sense when after I'm done, because I don't know, I'll just say some words. So in a screenplay, the way it's formatted is that one page is about 1 minute of screen time. Just got here, but indeed, blame Brian. Wait. But which Brian do I blame? I need direction. So in a screenplay, and hi Brian Cortijo, welcome. So in a screenplay, one page equals approximately a minute. A little longer, a little shorter, depends on dialogue and everything you put in there, but that's the basic idea. So 120 pages, 2 hours of time, and that's kind of what we're going with on this. And my very favorite book on screenwriting is Sid Field's Screenplay, The Foundations of Screenwriting. It's the kind of the classic that you just point to for all the things all the time. Now there's other ways to do it, but for our purposes, we're going to be using his theories, a 3-act structure, and kind of how it applies to the screenplay. So you have, a page of a screenplay, and 5-minute fight scene begins. Leave details to stunt team. Exactly, and we'll get to things like that in a moment too, because Rex did something very important as well. Next 4 pages intentionally blank. So in a script, it's composed of scenes, and a bunch of scenes make a sequence. A bunch of sequences make an act, and then once you get through all your acts, you have your whole story. Right? So scene, sequence, act. And then there's elements of scenes and sequences and acts, and we can get all that. But right now we're just kind of concerned with structure overall. And so what Sid Field did, this was years ago, was he looked and was like, there's patterns here. There's patterns that work, and here they are. And so he outlines the steps. And so in his 3-act setup, again, 2 hours, so 120 pages. So Act 1 is approximately 30 minutes. Act 2 is 60 minutes, because that's where the bulk of everything happens. And then Act 3 your resolution is another 30 minutes, right? And then going into from Act 1 into Act 2, you have a plot point 1, and then Act 2 into Act 3, you have a plot point 2. And so there's this handy graph. I'm going to put you in a couple links here. Here is a very good explanation of how all these things work and definitions right there. And then we're about to look at, and we're going to take a look at this graph, which breaks down everything. And I hit this window. Hey, look, I was talking about that. So you can see Act 1, plot point 1 is approximately at 20 to 30 minutes in. So usually around 10 minutes, there's something called an inciting incident, and that's, what propels the character forward. So we kind of get 10 minutes with the characters, seeing their lives and everything. And then Act 1 into Act 2 is your first plot point. Already putting the tech from Tech Friday to work. Yeah! Is your first plot point. This is kind of your first big plot change. And then Act 2, which in a different book, Sid divided into 2 halves. So if you read that first book, you may not see this midpoint thing. But first half, dramatic context, midpoint, then a second half. So 30 pages here, another 30 here, 60 pages total for Act 2. You have a midpoint, again, another. So you have your setup here, confrontation, and then Act 3 is your resolution. And then you have all your dramatic build-up here. You have a midpoint again, action, hero realization. And then here, you build up, tension rises. Then plot point 2 is you're building into your resolution, your big final battle is happening, and then you go into the aftermath and everything after your third point, and that's the end of your movie. One moment, I have a coughing fit. All right, and if you want all the details, how to do this, how to make effective characters, read the book this is based on. We're not going over that here. This is just kind of a overall structure to give us to work with. And so when it comes to your show, think about how many episodes you want. And then you can divide those episodes up into a Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and kind of have the same point. So if I have 8 episodes, I would put 2 of those episodes would qualify as my Act 1, and then I would do 4 for my Act 2, so 6, and then the remaining 2 would be my Act 3 for that season. Or something, roughly, right? These aren't exact, but as long as you hit it within those numbers, as you can see, plot point 1, approximately page 20 to 30, that's where it should happen, depending on how it goes. Plot point 2, approximately page 80 to 90, again, depending on plot and things like that. And so, yeah, you want Act 1 and Act 3. If you're doing 3 acts, you can do more 3 acts. There's all sorts of structures you can do, but for this, as like a starting point for all this, we're just saying 3 acts. So Act 1, Act 3, generally around the same size. Act 2 should be the most where all your big build-up happens. So, maybe this is 3 episodes, and this is 6, and maybe another 3, or however you want to divide it up. And so when you're looking at putting together a show, and you're thinking of story arcs, think about that second episode. What's going to happen here that propels the party forward? Like we've got to know the characters. You've set up the world, and now at that second episode, what's going to happen to go into that season, to continue that season and be the tension for that season? And then you have another list of episodes. Okay, you go through. And then, so 2 episodes here, 4 episodes here. So by episode 6, look at winding down the season. What's the resolution going to be? What's the big thing here? And then maybe you start off with a big battle, and then you go into kind of a cool down. And then you do something to maybe add a cliffhanger to propel you into your next season. So when I'm putting together a show, this is kind of what I think about. I think about how many episodes do I have, and how to divide them up into sort of an Act 1, an Act 2, and an Act 3. Sometimes there can be an Act 4. Like I said, that's just basis. There's all sorts of ways to put together a story, but I just needed a something to build on basis, and Sid Field's screenplay felt like the good way to do this. And so that is essentially how to think about the story. Again, not the characters, just the overall story. And because actual play is such a different beast to work with, how characters develop and things and how the story goes is up to the DM and the players, right? And so whatever they introduce to the story and what they bring about, as the DM, you have to be flexible enough to move with the players and change things around. But it's always good to have a basic idea of we're going this way. And don't be afraid to, if you're doing this as a show, because again, doing it as a show and doing it, with my friends, like last night I played D&D, and there's all sorts of things I wouldn't do if it were if what we played yesterday was a show. But because I'm with friends and it's not a show, a lot of stuff we don't need to worry about a lot of these things. This is just because it's a show, you're trying to be entertaining to an audience and have a forward story, right? And the other thing I liked about the screenplay metaphor, which is where Rex kind of hit on a thing, is that where Rex's 5-minute fight scene begins, leave details to stunt team. Another thing in screenplays is it's not like a regular novel or story. You don't fill in every detail as the screenwriter. You say interior bar day, that's called the slug line that goes on top. And what that bar looks like isn't up to you. That's up to the set construction team. If you have a way a character sounds in your head, you can put that down, but that can be up to the actor. That can change. The actor can change that, and that's fine. Because your script becomes something that belongs to the whole production team, right? This is a skeleton of what's to come, and everything else, is kind of the meat and the skin and the brains and the heart, and everything else comes together. Is all the other people, and there will be a lot of changes on the way, and you gotta be flexible and work with these things. And so in scripts, you say a fight ensues. Well, the sword clangs. The writer isn't going to go, okay, and they stand here, and then they cross, their swords cross here, and then they cross here. And, you're going to write a general description of, okay, fight going on, and maybe there's some dialogue there, and then, fighting continues. And because that's up to the stunt team and the actors and, their training and everything, and the director, how the director wants that to play out, that's up to those people. That isn't up to you as the screenwriter. And so a lot of DMing is kind of like that. A lot of stuff isn't up to you. A lot of character stuff is up to your players. And now you can talk beforehand, couple session zeros or whatever, about where you want to go, or, because we're doing a show, you kind of talk in the green room, as we call it, before you go on and say, okay, I would like our story to kind of get to this point here, and then everyone understands you're working towards a certain story beat. And, they work with you and try to help get there, right? Or you say, okay, I'm kind of going here, and that's all part of making these things a show to show someone. So yeah, that is our first step in this thing, is thinking about the structure of your season. And we'll get into how that relates to actually pressing the buttons at another time. But for right now, I just wanted to give everybody kind of thoughts on a structure. And if you are looking for screenwriting books, Sid Field has quite a few of them. I recommend Sid Field stuff really highly. And there is another book called Story by Robert McKee, I believe. That's a kind of a more in depth. It like a lot of screenwriting books. If you read Screenplay by Sid Field, and then you read other screenwriting books, you're going to see a lot of similarities. And some people expand, some people change. But I believe it is called Story. Robert McKee. Yeah, it has a longer title, but yeah, Story, Substance, Structure, Style, and the Principles of the Principles of Screenwriting by Robert McKee. That's another good one. People will recommend Save the Cat. I don't personally like Save the Cat, but tends to be a popular one. There are some good things in Save the Cat. I've read it, and there are writing jobs out there where, hey, do you know how to write in Save the Cat style? Because it's sort of proven cookie cutter method, right? And you just follow the method and fill in. This is why all your Hallmark movies are basically the same thing, because they all kind of follow Save the Cat. But so I'm not a huge fan of it. There are some good ideas in that book. It's and Screenplay, The Foundations of Screenwriting, not a long book. Robert McKee's Story is a longer book. It's we're talking about 480 pages for Robert McKee's Story, so it has some real in-depth things. And if you want to get to know more about writing characters and things like that, definitely check out Story. And Screenplay, The Foundations of Screenwriting, also does mention character things too. But today, like I said, was about plot because, again, character is something handled quite differently when we're talking about TTRPG Actual plays. So I didn't want to go into, character development, and then because now it's just sort of your idea on that character when it's actually the player's idea on their character, right? So yeah, that will be that for this week on DC Teaches You a Thing. If you have any comments, questions, please put them in chat or ask me later on Blue Sky. But I'm going to take another break, and then we'll get into our learning, right? Anyway, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. Stay tuned for the raid, and I'll see you all on Monday. Bye.